Welcome, everyone, to the 29th episode of Gateway House's Unfolding Geopolitics. I'm Sifra Lenton, the Bombay History Fellow at Gateway House, and today we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Raja Karthikeya, who is a former international civil servant for 15 years and has worked in global conflict zones as a peace builder and in conflict resolution. Mr. Karthikeya is presently in India on a year-long sabbatical to research and write a book on the importance of peace mediation, which is, I think, is relevant given the number of wars and conflict zones that are arising almost every day. What is interesting is that Mr. Karthikeya has just returned home to India after a 5-year posting in Tehran. When Mr. Karthikeya dropped in at the Gateway House office 2 weeks ago, we debated whether the US would attack Iran given the naval buildup in the Gulf. But more importantly, I wanted to know from him the ground situation in Iran. Was the population so oppressed as is made out by the media that regime change would be a natural outcome of a US Israel attack on the country that has taken place now? Now, Mr. Karthikeya, based on your 5-year experience of living in Tehran, what do you think will be the most likely outcome politically in Iran with this war?
Thank you for having me, Sifra, and you can call me Raja. It's easier. Uh,
Okay.
so, uh, yes, thank you. I've had the privilege of serving in various parts of the of West Asia, including Iran. I believe this is a pivotal moment in the history of West Asia. There was even back in 2006, as you recall, when the war in Lebanon was taking place. There was the former the then U.S. National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice said it was the birth pangs of a new Middle East. Um, it did not certainly lead to a good outcome for Lebanon in terms of there was a ceasefire zone, but we've seen recurrent wars in Lebanon, including as recently as 2024. But what is the challenge here now is that the war in Iran is certainly probably the most extensive regional war that we have seen.
Mhm.
Uh, there are parallels to be drawn perhaps with the 1991 Gulf War when Saddam retaliated against the uh, US-led coalition by firing missiles into Israel. But this time it's different. This time the parties at conflict are US and Israel on one side and Iran on the other. And in the process, because as Iran says, because they host US military bases, Iran has retaliated against several countries in the Gulf as well, including Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Saudi Arabia. So the political outcomes are hard to predict, except that there are the possibility of internal change in Iran, which has been talked about, including by U.S. President Trump, when he said that without using, he said that we will take down the government, and then the in Iran, maybe not in as many words, but he said that it's up to the people of Iran then to uh, come and take over the government. And so, in a way, it's clearly, aimed at a regime change in Iran, as the U.S. puts it. On the other hand, I think Israel's interests are about ensuring that it has perhaps what it believes to be perennial security after this, because it has had its rivals in the region, whether it was Iraq, Syria, Libya. They have all had changes, um, regime changes, and so with Iran, there will be potentially no other rival left in the region. At the same time, it is a possibility that the issue of Palestine, which has been at the heart of the Iran Israel rivalry in some ways, because Iran says that its rivalry with Israel is motivated by its support for Palestine, which uh, I and I think that issue of Palestine will perhaps be put in the you know it could be sidelined for a while to come, depending on how the uh, how things shape up now. The third outcome is that the countries in the region, the Gulf countries, which some of which have normalized ties with Israel, and at the same time, since 2023, the Gulf countries have normalized relations with Iran as well, through the process that was facilitated, by China in back in March 2023. So now, with the impact of the Iranian strikes on the Gulf countries, the question is whether that will hold, that normalization will hold. On the other hand, um, the Gulf countries were also not very happy with the strikes that Israel started, because they were actually trying to prevent these conflict from starting over the past 8 weeks. So the question is, which normalization, which uh, among their normalization with Israel or their normalization with Iran, which one will they potentially forego because of the impact of this war? I think it's possible that the relationship that they have with Iran will be potentially the one that will be more affected. So that again, once again, means that the optimism we had about peace across the Persian Gulf will be, uh, badly damaged. So these are three political outcomes that I see in the immediate term.
So, in terms of regime change, Raja, do you think that it will be a more moderate person from the religious party coming in, or do you think there's actually going to be a civilian government in that sense?
Well, I mean, there is no reason to believe that the Iranian system has, is in the process of major change per se, because the system is quite resilient. It has a succession ladder of sorts, not exactly a succession ladder, but it has delegation of authority. It has there's a constitution which dictates, what is to be done in the case of an emergency. So the system, and I don't like to use the word regime because anyone can call anyone's system as a regime. There are no doubts that there are certain peculiarities to the Iran system, and that Iran system has, uh, it's not, I mean, although they have elections, but the vetting of candidates is always very controversial. The vetting of who gets, including gets questioned. Sometimes you get candidates disqualified for example, in the last presidential election, um, a former president was disqualified as a presidential candidate. So it says something about the peculiarities of the system. So this system in Iran, however, has very strong roots in the sense that all the way down to district level, all the way down to maybe even village level, uh, it has over the last 46 years, there are as many as 4,000 clerics who are appointed as religious figures who are appointed to guide ministries. There are prayer leaders in each district who also wield a considerable influence. And I believe that uh, to attempt something on the lines of what, for example, was done in Iraq through the de-Baathification process of sorts, I think it will be a far stretch. I can't see that, at least at where things stand right now. I believe the system is holding strong. We also haven't seen the kind of defections that were perhaps expected or foretold that would happen, in the case of, you know, the a senior leadership in the country was removed. We didn't see that in June. We didn't see that. We haven't seen that so far this war either. So I don't see the change. I mean, too much changing. What has happened is that since 20, now inside the Iranian political system, there are, you could say, the hardliners, as they say, and the reformists, and there has been a swing of power between them, and the system is extremely capable. Actually, it's of uh, moving between either faction, depending on how the circumstances are. So right now we have a reformist politician as president, and there are certain social freedoms. I mean, for example, all the challenges over the enforcement of hijab have been relaxed. You have uh, concerts anyway, happening all the time. There are um, certain issues. For example, women cannot sing on stage. Those restrictions remain, but there are several other restrictions socially that have been somewhat slightly relaxed. So that's why I don't see um, major change coming. What is likely to trigger change in Iran, and that was in fact the trigger of the protests in January as well, yeah, is the economic situation, which has become very acute, and I'm happy to talk more about that. Thanks.
Raja, can you just tell us how do you feel that economic situation and the protests that took place in December, Jan, from 28th of December, how did that play into the current situation leading up to the attack?
Thanks, Ifra. The protests started in 28th of on 28th of December 2025. These protests were initially spurred by a rapid change in the exchange rate. Iran's had this system of multiple exchange rates to cope with the fact that because of U.S. sanctions, the exchange rate is often the gray market exchange rate is often quite it's quite high. So for importers um, in particular, there's a special rate that is offered. At the same time, to incentivize exporters to bring in the dollars that they earn through exports, a special rate is offered. But all of this came to a point where in December, we found that exporters were not bringing in um billions of dollars that they were earning through exports back into the country, and they were keeping it abroad. As such, there was a shortage of dollars. And then that meant that imports suddenly became harder, uh, and you had to buy dollars in the gray market, which was, especially for small traders such as those importing mobile phones and mobile phone accessories, and they were the first ones to come on the street. The value became really acute. So, in fact, Iran's currency lost tremendous value. I mean, since, for example, over the last 3 years alone, in 2003, a dollar was February 2003, for example, 2023, excuse me, a dollar was 420,000 rial. And now we're talking about 3 years later, a dollar is 1.6 million rial. So that it clearly shows the rapid depreciation in the value of the currency. And this in turn has had a domino effect because inside the country, there are other economic difficulties. So multiple people find that, I mean, the value of the currency doesn't keep pace with inflation. So even though there are subsidies that actually ensure that everyone has a certain subsistence, level of living, but people find themselves doing, two, three jobs. Uh, there are some say that there are as many as uh, 10 million, uh, cab drivers, ride share, like there's an equivalent of Uber there, Uber drivers in the country, because everybody's trying to supplement their income by driving. So that kind of tells you, and that's the most of any country in the world, but as a share of the country's population. So it's a it's a really bad time economically. On the other hand, I mean, pensions, for example, pensions don't amount to much because pensions are they don't go far. So senior citizens are worried. So this was the moment when the protests became more and more acute. Then the protests, which began on an economic note, they were echoed. Those calls for protests were echoed by political dissidents living abroad, including, for example, uh, the son of the former Shah. And then that seems to have perhaps given, led the system, the government, to suspect that perhaps the protests are going to be, hijacked by, uh, you know, uh, malefactors or political dissidents. So
Mhm.
we saw, um, in January, that the protests by between Jan 9th and 13th, they became, there was a response that was extremely harsh. The government said that it was because certain terrorists got mixed in among them, among the protesters, but that they were trying to distinguish between them.
Mm.
Whatever it was, the response was extremely harsh, and the official figures are that 3,119 people were killed,
Oh my.
including about 100 odd security forces
Mm.
and in a span of just maybe 4 days. So you can imagine the horror, the shock of it in a country of just 90 million people. These numbers are not small. So Iran is still recovering from that. There's been some amount of, there's been mourning. There is a lot of polarization in society among
Mm.
those who believe the government's narrative and who believe that the response was disproportionate and harsh. So that is where things stood when this war started. And then, as you saw, at some point, the U.S. President said that he asked for people, saying that help is on the way. He said, come out on the streets, help is on the way. But then there was no military intervention for weeks, and weeks passed. Then the protests completely almost died down. There was some recent ones in the universities, but otherwise they really died down. Now, uh, again, when these airstrikes started by the U.S. and Israel, this thing has again been brought up, saying that human rights is another reason for us to
Mm.
actually for us to pursue these military actions against Iran.
Mm.
So that, I mean, it's a narrative now. It's not
Mm.
clear to what extent this will spur people,
Mm.
whether these statements will make people believe that these military actions are actually in support of, the protests of January,
Mm.
whether people believe this. What is for certain is that most people in Iran want uh, the circumstances to change. Now, the
Mm.
question is how that change will come about, from externally or internally, is the question. And what is the outcome of the change that they're willing to accept? That also remains to be seen.
Right, right. That's a great summing up, Raja. You've been in Iran and you've seen, I mean, you've been through all this tension and everything that's been happening, I mean, the last critical 5 years. You've also been in Afghanistan. What do you think is the difference in the situation between these two governments? I mean, the Taliban and the uh, the religious government that's there in Iran today. Do the
So
women
I
enjoy
think,
more freedom? What is the educational system like? Are they educated? Do they work? We don't know these things because most media, global media, don't cover the
oh,
ground realities of what is happening. So, what is it like out there? Are they oppressed? Is there, I mean, what kind of education do they get? So,
sure.
can you
Thank
just
you.
tell us a
Thanks for
little
that.
about that?
Sure. I mean, you can say that Afghanistan and Iran have, broadly speaking, there's a primacy of the clergy. So that is a theocracy, you could say, but they're completely different. They're completely different beyond that, saying that there's a
Raja,
primacy
can
of
you just
clergy.
speak up a little louder?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, yeah,
So I
that'll
think
be better.
so. Apart from the fact that both Afghanistan, the political systems of Afghanistan and Iran now, in
Mm.
both of them, there's a primacy for the clergy. Apart from that fact, they're completely different. There is, a system of popular election in Iran, which
Mm.
is, absent in Afghanistan. There is, whether people, how much of the population participates how much, how fair is the election and so on. This you can question that, but there is an election. There is a
mm,
popular election. There are candidates with different viewpoints, openly, fairly openly,
mm,
or maybe relatively openly questioning each other's stances
mm,
in Iran. There's only one party, sure, but there are candidates, there are factions, as we call them.
mm.
Then the other thing is that when it comes to women, there is uh, certainly there is a in Iran there are certain glass ceilings. So you don't see, for example, women are constituted about 14.4% of the workforce. So they're definitely underrepresented in the workforce. This is an
Right.
issue.
Mm,
And there are certain challenges in the legal system where, for example, the witness of like a woman's witness is worth maybe half of that of a man, and so on. And
mm.
these are all have been catalogued by,
Right.
for example, even the Universal Periodic Review of Human Rights. It's all been
Mm,
catalogued. Now, on the other hand, Iran is also, it's remarkably, I mean, Iranian women are extremely independent. You
mm.
have as many as, I mean, till a couple of years ago, there were like 110 women to every 100 men enrolled in university.
Okay.
You have a situation where maternal mortality and infant mortality is among the world's lowest. You have the official spokesperson of the government is a lady. You have a vice president who's a female vice president. You have the largest ministry in government, in budgetary terms, also headed by women. So there are a tremendous number of, I mean, there is that it's you cannot say, of course you don't have female clerics in a country where the primacy is is given for the clergy. So these issues are there, but it is not as black and white as is painted. And I sometimes feel there is an absolute lack of perspective for those who say the country is you know and when if it were to be compared to Afghanistan, I mean, there are a number of, Iran hosts the world's largest refugee population, and there are any number of Afghan refugees who are in Iran because their daughters can be educated. So
Right.
where in Afghanistan you can't, a girl can't study beyond sixth grade, and except in perhaps one of those, madrasa school. Here in Iran, you have women doing PhDs. So comparison is, I mean, it's odious. It's impossible between the two countries. So I think whatever be the reasons, uh, you know, there is no possible. We cannot equate Iran and Afghanistan's political systems as they stand today.
You also did mention, Rajat, when you had come in, that Iran today is hosting 4.1 million Afghan refugees. What is the condition of these refugees? And you did say that a lot of them are Tajiks and Hazaras. So, what is the
Well, I
condition? I
mean,
mean, 4.1 million is a lot. I mean,
well, sure. I mean, what I meant to say was that I don't know about the ethnic breakup, but I'll say that Iran definitely hosts the largest recorded, refugee population right now. And this is, Iran has been very generous in hosting them for over 40 years, actually.
mm,
Um, since 1979, when the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Since then, there have been a steady stream of refugees, and now in 2024, Iran did began a process of repatriating many
okay,
of these, they call them returns of many of these refugees. Many left, some left voluntarily, some were deported, some repatriated. But and yet it is still in the range of about 4 million or so refugees are still in
okay,
country. And I think this is often also missed in talking about Iran. We don't hear the fact that 5% of the country's population equivalent is refugees. Can you imagine
oh,
5% of any country's population equivalent being refugees? So,
right.
and the unique thing is that in Iran, the refugees are not only 1% of them are hosted in camps. The rest
Mm,
are actually, they go to regular schools. They have, which is in line with
mm,
the, all the good practices of refugee management that, uh, you know, that are required of governments that are signatories, for example, to the 1951 Refugee Convention. So Iran has done that very well. Uh, Certainly, those who are Farsi speakers in Iran, right, Dari
Mhm.
speakers, those minorities feel more at home in Iran, and so they tend to come. But there are also
Right.
Pashtuns. There are those who have come through Pakistan too, and so yeah, the Iran has been a second home for generations of Afghans.
That's an interesting observation because these are aspects of Iranian society that are not really brought out, even of the polity. So, what do you think are the strengths of this vast country economically and socially that it should build on after the war, whatever government comes into place? And what must it do to diversify from an oil dependent economy?
I think Iran's biggest asset is its human capital.
Mm,
Extremely talented.
mm,
You have, I mean, Iran per capita wins more Olympic medals than perhaps any other country, certainly in the region. Actually, the fact that Iran has, despite sanctions, there's been a level of technology from space technology to to indigenous production of automobiles. It says something. There have been people like Maria Mirzakhani, the Fields Medal winner. There have been, Iranian diaspora is extremely successful, and that's also because most of the Iranian diaspora are among the best of the brains leaving the
mm,
country. And there's been a steady brain drain that has actually affected Iran. So that retaining that human capital, I'd say, is going to be um, and now, just in case if there's an exodus because of the war, which is very
right.
likely, again, bringing people back and for them to contribute to the reconstruction of the country after
Mm,
the conflict will be a big challenge for any leader. Um, for sure, Iranians are extremely patriotic. They really, given a chance, many of them will go back to Iran. It's something that we don't see as much necessarily in other cultures, but Iranians are extremely patriotic. It's almost a certain cultural, I'd say, it's like kind of cultural nationalism actually that
right.
binds them to the country. The second big challenge for them is going to be so you have social, political, and economic freedoms. The biggest issue that demand for people is in terms of economic freedoms, which it ties into the second part of your question as to the diversification of industry, because public sector is dominates industry,
Mm,
and job creation becomes is quite hard. And unless you have, in fact, the president estimated that I think it was last year that there is need for as much as 125 to 150 billion dollars of foreign investment, in order to balance the budget. So, and that level of for that level of investment to happen, there needs to be a massive reform and disinvestment. Uh, you know, that in a way that promotes the private sector.
Raja, you also mentioned that a lot of the old companies are still there in Iran, the multinational companies. Has that thinned out, or
Some
are there still a few present there who know the ground situation and will be able to build up from there?
Well, I don't know what has happened in the last 3 days to these companies, but
Okay.
certainly there are a few. It's conceivable that I mean right now I think everyone's off work. We'll see what happens, but there are a few European companies that have been there. The biggest challenge is that because of sanctions, and it's mainly, for example, sanctions by US and European sanctions, make repatriation of profits fairly difficult. And Similarly, bank guarantees, the
Right.
inability for investors to get bank guarantees, uh, that's barrier. Now, what is possible is that some of these, uh, depending on how what is the outcome of the war politically, um, Iran certainly has the assets. It has tremendous oil resources. Even in terms of renewable energy, there are plenty of opportunities. It
Right.
has extremely talented, human capital.
Mm.
And honestly, Iran has everything going for it. From location between Asia and Europe of sorts, uh, it's people, natural resources. I don't think there's even any investor should even have a question, in terms of doing it. It's just that I think if the political situation stabilizes, I'm sure Iran will be able to, attract the right kind of investment and, yeah, foreign capital.
Raja, my last question is that you said that more than anything else, I mean, Iran has the potential. We don't know what's going to happen, what kind of government's going to come into place. Is there going to be civil unrest after the war sort of peters off? But you did mention that there is one thing that no one has counted on, and one is that is climate change is a real threat to the country. Water resources are an issue. So can you just explain a little about what are the climate issues that Iran is facing?
Sure. In December, just before I mentioned the economic protests that began, um, just a month prior, for example, in November and early December, all that people could talk about was a water crisis. And at that
Okay.
time, it was not the real crisis, but it was about, a real crisis, which is related
Mhm.
to water. So Iran is now the fourth most water deficient country on the planet. There is a real, in terms of, uh, I mean, there are glaciers, there are, uh, the mountains around Tehran get a lot of snow. But what we find is that across the country, there's been rapid land degradation. Land subsidence has increased, in fact. And we're finding that, even Iran, there was a UN multidimensional vulnerability index, that came out a couple of years ago, which shows, which actually indicated that Iran has one of the lowest tree covers in the world. So there just aren't enough trees. And so the precipitation levels, in fact, a lot of the water in the country is lost. Up to 70% of the water, is 60 to 70% is lost through evaporation because of, in irrigation canals. So there
Okay.
is a huge challenge. uh, as temperatures have increased, for example, where the world's mean temperature has increased by um, zero point 0.9 degrees
Mm.
over the last 100 years. In the
Mm.
case of Iran, it's double that, by almost 2 degrees centigrade. So Iran
Okay.
is in a very not in a very good spot when it comes to climate change. Now Iran is also the sixth largest, carbon emitter. That has been a challenge because it has
Okay.
tremendous, oil resources, and industry is not energy efficient. So
Okay.
uh, that's where there needs to be a complete overhaul of industry to make it energy efficient. The reliance on um, cheap energy. In fact, energy is so cheap, that's why it's the industry is not energy efficient, and that perhaps has to be addressed. And most importantly, there needs to be a concerted climate action. Iran has a tremendous amount of possibilities in terms of solar energy, wind, pumped hydro, and they've been trying to do it. They recently, even just 3 days before the war began, the president inaugurated a massive, solar, uh, you know, uh, power plant. So they're trying to increase renewable energy. This really needs to be scaled up, as soon as peace returns.
My last question to you, Raja, is what do you think will be the best outcome? What would be the best outcome of this war for the Iranian people as well as for the region? Given
I think the
everything that
best,
we've talked about,
yeah.
what do you think would be the ideal outcome?
Well, the ideal outcome would depend on, who you ask. I think, from everyone's perspective, it's different as to what is ideal, right? There will be those who say that there should be a completely different change in um, in the Iranian system. There may be those who say that Iran winning the war is important in terms of staving off this aggression, and the US should be the one halting it. There may be those in the US and Israel perhaps who believe that the possibility of any support I mean, regionally, Iran's influence needs to be completely changed. So there are an ideal outcome where that's the entire problem, that there is no consensus on what an ideal outcome is. Even within Iran, it is not clear that people want one way or another. But what I'll say is this: there is, I think this war is not sustainable. This whether it is the war, the bombardment of Iran is, possibility of goals such as completely changing the system. I'm not sure how they will turn out. On the other hand, the possibility of Iran maintaining its the friendly ties that it has developed with the Gulf countries, being maintained while it is retaliating against the U.S. strikes by striking the Gulf countries. This is also, a big question. So what you need is a cessation of these kinetic actions, of these military actions, and then you need to give. I still believe that diplomacy has a chance. The diplomacy, it may not be in a, often sometimes we feel that a rivalry has gone on for too long, so let's go and finish this once and for all through military action. But honestly, that's not how disputes or problems ever get resolved forever. They'll only get resolved through, through diplomatic dialogue.
So that's a true peace builder and conflict resolution person talking. Thank you so much, Raja, and thank you for
Thank
being
you.
with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sifra, and thank you to all the colleagues at Gateway House.